Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about the new moon in Taurus. And we've actually had this new moon already, so most of us will be able to now emotionally connect to our experiences. And my hope today is to be able to help you see the empowered perspective, as well as see what the emotional growth potential was in it for you and in it for me with this new moon. Pluto is playing a very significant role, as you probably feel, and Pluto is actually squaring the nodes at the moment, which I really want to get into and talk to you about, but I'll save that for a later point in the video. I think I want to really start with talking about Taurus, and I want to ground a very visceral experience of what this archetype says to us and how we live out the stories of Taurian themes within our lives. So first things first, the Taurus archetype from an evolutionary astrology's perspective is that this archetype reflects the phenomena of survival, okay? So if you look out into nature, you'll see that all living organisms have some form of mechanism within them that stimulates and creates the awareness for survival, okay? So in our human body experience, we have very primal needs that we require in order for us to sustain life. A Taurus, at the most fundamental archetype or level, reflects that instinct, okay? So anything that needs to live has to have some form of survival instinct within its survival mechanism. So Taurus represents this. So I want you to think about right now, in terms of all this Taurus energy, where do you see human beings working and being very conscious of, what do we need to survive? Where are the resources that we use and consume that help us meet this deep primal instinct for us to be able to continue life moving forward? It's a very interesting way of being able to tune into this archetype, right? It's very visceral, it's on our sort of salient awareness right here with us. We're seeing it a lot, and especially with Uranus there as well, creating a lot of ripples and changes and asking us to see and understand our resources from an entirely new perspective. So that's one aspect of the Taurian archetype. Now, emotionally and psychologically for us, when we live out these Taurian themes, I'm wanting us to think about it in the context of our society, as a culture, as well as in our own daily environment lives, like our environmental lives, right? Taurus also speaks to the parts of us that we tend to hide or disown because the context of a society or the community that we're in or the culture that we live within will define very specific rules that will be seen as taboo, okay? So there are patterns of psychological and emotional structures, right, within our lives that we have that says, if you do this, that is bad, okay? So what this does for us when we live out Taurian themes is we experience parts of our instincts to be sort of hidden or put away and say, that's bad, that's a bad action, that's a bad behavior, that's wrong. And what tends to happen is that when we suppress something, whether it be that's unnatural, right? When we suppress these patterns, they start to percolate and then they'll bounce up and pop up in different ways in our psychology and our emotions. And so Uranus moving through the Taurus archetype brings to us collectively and individually these disowned parts of ourselves that have not had attention. We would call them our shadow selves, right? These parts of us that are not unhealed. So what I want to also take away from what I've just shared with you right now is that we're looking at and addressing deep underlayers within ourselves, emotionally and psychologically, that we carry, that we've had to put aside and make judgments on them and say, this is shameful to have, or this is not allowed, right? This is the healing potential that is held with this new moon from an evolutionary perspective, from a sort of holistic perspective. We're looking at beginning to address these underlying patterns that we may shame psychologically and emotionally because it's been told to us or perceived that that's not a good thing. And where it actually comes from is a deep underlying pattern that says, if I act like this and it does something negative, it threatens my survival, right? So therefore, hide it, put it away, shut it down. So in a very subtle kind of way, let's say you're sort of 3 years old or 5 years old, for instance, 7 years old, and you have a certain action or a behaviorism. And the environment, right, says to you, ooh, that's bad. Oh, that was not a good thing to do. You should not do that. And then what we do is we psychologically compartmentalize it. We put that part of ourselves away or that action away, and we judge it. And we say bad, right? But of course, these aspects have not allowed for that prana energy to come out. So it manifests in our psychology as adults as judgment calls about other things, other people. We ridicule. We'll usually sort of create a othering aspect where we'll judge that action or that behavior subconsciously through that person. But what it's really reflecting within ourselves is disowned parts of ourselves that, whether the culture, whether society, whether our parents, whether this, whatever environment was that said that was bad, we've hidden away. Now, what I'm wanting to bring to the conversation here is it's not necessarily the bad things that we need to address. There are actually parts of ourselves that we've hidden away because they haven't been nurtured, right? In some way, shape, or form. So this Uranus in Taurus energy, as well as the pattern of the sun and the moon that's been moving through Taurus, as well as Jupiter now entering Taurus, we get this opportunity to begin addressing belief systems that we have within ourselves that says, hey, I can't do this, or this is a negative trait, or I can't believe in myself. But underneath that, in a positive light, in a self-actualizing light, hey, this is who I really am, but I've hidden it away because I'm afraid of being vulnerable, because when I did express it, I was judged or criticized or not told to follow or believe in myself. Like, these are the common kind of dynamics that plays out for us. So this energy right now is really putting the pressure on us to be able to address where these somatic sensations and feelings and triggers exist within us, and to let them be aired out, right? So a practical way to do this is to begin, say, journaling, where you maybe have some certain patterns of thinking that shut your idea of pursuing a goal or a dream within your life down. And this voice, this message, is not necessarily yours. It's the impressions or the experiences from the outside that you've internalized at a certain point and said, this is not possible. So I've kept it hidden, right? Because of survival. Now, this opportunity with Uranus here wants to say, hey, let's liberate this, right? Let's break it open. Let's explore this. Let's see what this is about, right? So that's the kind of like the meta of the conversation that I want to bring to the astrology chart. So, okay. So here we are looking at the new moon in Taurus, and we're just going to do a little symmetry of the chart. I'm sure you've probably seen this chart a million times in other videos, but there is that Pluto sitting at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which has brought a lot of attention to us. Whenever a big planet like Pluto or Neptune or Uranus or Saturn moves into a different sign, there's always going to be a lot of content, a lot of talk, a lot of sort of amplification of that. So here we have this Pluto, we know it, there's an Aquarius, it's 0 degrees, it's tipped its toe there, and now it's retrograding back into Capricorn. And that's a very significant message. Okay, so at the moment you got that Pluto there, and look what Pluto's doing, right? It's in this opposition to Mars at 29 degrees, and it's also there squaring the south node, squaring the north node as well. And then you also see Jupiter on top of that north node there too. Okay, so that's very significant, right? We've got, again, the new moon sitting at 28 degrees of Taurus, right? This new moon has passed Uranus, so that's where if I were to look at this chart, there's a thread of individual, like freedom here. There's the Uranus wants to create disruption. So part of this energy carries with it disruption, right? Do something different is the storyline there. Okay, Venus, again, squaring Chiron, and it is also making a relationship to this sun and moon, right? Venus is the planetary ruler of Taurus. So looking at Venus in this chart is a very important thing to do. So we're going to do that. So Pluto squaring the nodes and opposition to Pluto, Mars, very important. There's a natural trine between Mars and Neptune in the chart, which I'll address. This is about where we are processing grief relative to these experiences that have mystified us, where we've needed to hide the parts of ourselves in order to survive that emotional part. This trine is asking us to bring that energy forward. So that's the symmetry of the chart. And as I said, I wanted to talk to you about squares to the nodes. So let's firstly do this, okay? So for those of you that are not familiar with what squares to the nodes are, this is something that is introduced in evolutionary astrology. And simply what it represents is one or two planets. You know, you could have three if you're unlucky, but but when you have one planet or more, in this case it's Pluto, in a 90-degree angle, so there's the square aspect, the red, to what are called the lunar nodes. Do you see this here? Okay, so those are the south and north nodes, and when a planet forms a 90-degree aspect to the nodes, that's what is called a squares to the nodes. Okay, so you can go ahead and look at this in your own astrology chart to see if you've got squares to the nodes. So the question then is, well, how do you resolve this? What is it about? Well, from an EA perspective, when squares to the nodes are manifested, it simply suggests that there is a developmental essence of this energy that is occurring in this lifetime. Okay, so if it's in your natal chart, as in if you have squares to the nodes, that planet that is over here, right, in your case, whatever that may be, is developing in this lifetime. You're bringing it forward and you're trying to develop a sense of identity that is part of your karma. Okay, so when you're looking at squares to nodes, you're looking at where you are developing emotion and psychologically regarding these planets, and it is part of your karmic story. The part of the karmic story is associated with the nodes of the moon. So when you have squares to the nodes in a transit like this, as in we're looking at it from the collective perspective, or we're looking at it from each of us, me and you, we've got this square in our astrology charts. So for me, it's landing in my 12th house, right? Pluto is in my 12th house, the south node is in my 10th, the north node is in my 4th. So if I were to look at this square and try to understand it for myself, I would need to synthesize what the 10th house, the 4th house, and the 12th house is about for me. And it's very clear for me, this has a lot to do with a shift in direction regarding my sense of emotional relationship to, my healing process, because it's in the 12th house. So I'm going through a deep healing process. Pluto is actually squaring my natal Pluto, and I can see that there is a lot of psychological and emotional definitions that I am tearing apart, Scorpio, and I'm removing. So that's what you're going to do there, right? You're going to go to your chart, you're going to look at your south node, wherever sign that's in, and you're going to ask yourself, what am I letting go here? You're going to look at your north node and you're going to say, what am I learning more about this? And then when you look at Pluto, you're going to then ask yourself the question, how is this Pluto placement, whatever sign that's in, whatever house that's in, what am I learning to transform here? So those are the three questions. The south node, what are you letting go of? What is transforming? So if that's in your 7th house, think about what is changing in the context of relationships for you, okay? When you look at your north node, as in what house that's in for you, you want to then ask yourself the question, what am I learning more here? What am I gaining deeper perspective here, right? So if the north node is in your 1st house, ask yourself the question, how am I learning to embody new directions within myself, okay? How am I learning to establish being a little bit alone as opposed to always being in a relationship? Or where are my boundaries? That's an example of the north node. Then when you look at the Pluto placement, as in where Pluto is natally for you, transit for you, you're going to ask yourself the question, what am I eliminating here? So it's very much the same as the South Node, but the Pluto piece for all of us is asking us to address even deeper emotional and psychological patterns of disempowerment. So the Pluto piece, the question that you want to ask yourself is, what am I ending here? What am I closing in this pattern? So if Pluto is in your 4th house, right, then you are looking at understanding the underlying emotional patterns that you have when you were growing up, right? What childhood memories are coming to the surface that impact your sense of identity, if it was Pluto in the 4th house, as an example, okay? So I hope that you can work with that and watch this video consistently so that you can take your own chart and try and overlay these two, okay? All right, so squares to the nodes in the context of this chart, Pluto is telling us that we are trying to resolve something. We're trying to resolve this Pluto energy here. And in this case, Pluto is trying to resolve itself through the South Node. So when you look at squares to the nodes, you always have to take out your left arm and you have to extend it like that, and you need to stand on the planet itself. So if I was standing on Pluto and I was looking all the way down to the middle here, so this piece, and I took out my left arm like that, then this is where I need to be focusing. So for all of us right now, we are focusing on how to transmute ourselves relative to this symbol. So again, if Pluto, if your South Node is in your 7th house, then you are resolving relationship patterns. If Pluto is in your 5th house, you're resolving past or memories of self-validation, self-recognition. If the South Node is sitting in your 9th house, you may be looking to address underlying core truths or belief systems that you hold about reality and life itself. If if the South Node is in your 2nd house, you're looking to address underlying feelings of security that are linked with materialism, your self-worth, as well as what parts of you have you hidden in order to stay safe so that, you know, your life is not threatened, or your psychology and your emotions are not threatened, right? So where do you disown something about yourself? Okay, there's quite a lot of information coming at you right now. I totally get it. I'm not, this video, you're meant to watch it over and over. It's not something you just get once, okay? But I really want to be thorough with all of us when it comes to doing this astrology. I think it's important. Okay, so I'm going to do a summary of this, so don't worry about that. So the next thing that we're going to look at in terms of us collectively, we are at the big meta story. We are addressing and letting go of emotional and psychological patterns that no longer serve your sense of truth. That's the sentence here, okay? That's the sort of framing of the squares to the nodes here. Now, let's take a look at this Mars opposed Pluto aspect. Mars is saying it's time to bring those things to the surface, okay? Whenever Mars and Pluto are in an opposition to each other or a square with each other, this is a very intense pattern, because what happens is you have the murky waters of Pluto, and then Mars comes along and says, hey, let's throw a stick of dynamite underneath that water and see what happens. So there's big emotions that come to the surface, and then when we are flooded with these emotions, we need to process through what we are carrying within our subconscious. So this is not like one of those little transits that you just read and go, oh, okay, cool. This is like a deep, heavy process. So there's a lot of heavy processing emotionally and psychologically going on for us, and it has been, and this is all leading to an experience of transformation, an experience of liberation, an experience of something being like, ah, thank God that I'm getting this off my chest. So if you're one of those people that have been really getting things off your chest, right, really acknowledging what emotional weight you're carrying, you're doing the work. And when you're doing that, you're transmuting something deep within your psychology and your emotional patterns. It's a very powerful transit. Take advantage of it. And again, what are you taking advantage of? You're addressing parts of you that you carry with you that are outdated, that feel like they're running Windows 95 operating system, right? Or the first operating system that came along with Macs, or Apple products. It's like, nope, that's no longer the time that we live in right now. There's a necessary need for acceleration and moving forward. It feels like it's moving forward and it's held in the emotional body. Okay, so I'm going to address this Neptune trine. Again, all of these planets are existing holistically. This is not like one happens and another happens and another happens. It's like all of it happens all at once. So the trine that Neptune is having to Mars has a binary effect in it, okay? On one part, we are like grieving the decaying part of our former self or former emotional insecurity attachments, that we are grieving and letting go of those feelings, right? We're acknowledging them as painful. We're acknowledging them as sad. We're acknowledging them as something that is coming to an end. So let's say an emotion comes up around your childhood memory where you carry feelings of, I don't know, guilt as an example, okay? You are grieving the process of going through that, needing, like experiencing and carrying guilt with you, how it's affected you in your life. And then you're also at the same time acknowledging the rewrite that maybe the grief or the guilt that you are carrying was the guilt of the parent, right? Or you're carrying the guilt that doesn't belong to you, but you needed to use that guilt as a way to protect yourself. Again, the core narrative, that Taurus archetype, there's an opportunity to let out the parts of you that have been shunned, that have been put aside, that have been, you know, put away or never allowed to be free. You know, you might have been highly creative as a kid, but the environment couldn't support it. And then when you said, hey, I want to go and do this, they said, just forget about it. You're not good enough, etc. And so you carry that subtle little doubt of maybe I'm not good enough. Like this energy is here to rewrite that. So the Neptune trine Mars is giving us the capacity to feel deeply into where those parts of ourselves no longer are true. And asking that question, is this true? Or is it a message I carry from my past? Okay, so that's the key piece there. Then when we go ahead and we look at this Mars, sorry, not this Mars, but this Chiron in 18 degrees Aries squaring the Cancer, the Venus in Cancer. Again, just want to show you here. The moon is the planetary ruler of Cancer. So it's influencing this Venus archetype. The moon is also influencing the Mars archetype here, okay? So these two planets here are very significant in terms of understanding the new this new moon, because again, those archetypes are being, like it's conditioning, okay? Then when you look at Chiron, Chiron is actually being conditioned by Mars, as in, if you want to understand Chiron in the chart, understand Mars opposed Pluto. If you want to understand the Mars in the chart, see it through the lens of the new moon in Taurus. And there we have what is called this like repeating loop or theme. So it becomes very clear. We are bringing to the surface parts of ourselves that have been wounded, where our lack of agency, or where we've been incapacitated. The incapacitated part, where I'm getting that from specifically, is Chiron through Aries, okay? Right, Chiron through Aries. And Chiron through Aries is healing our capacity to come into the self, to remember the self, to remember that this in presence. So what that looks like in reality is things like people taking more care of their health, people eradicating and removing certain patterns within their lives that they know no longer serve them anymore, realizing that they have agency, stepping out of any codependent forms of patterns, relationships, etc. These are the types of things that Chiron is healing within us, and it's all about taking that step and, you know, moving out of a disassociation. So Chiron squaring Venus at this moment in time is the tension that we're all feeling, right? Between, can I do this? Can I step into this new space? Can I transform these emotions? And the squares to the nodes, Pluto square the nodes, is saying, you can do this if you address these underlying patterns that are holding you back. Yeah? So let me switch back to the main screen for us. And okay, so here is how I would like to summarize this all for us. Okay, first things first, Pluto square the nodes. What this is symbolizing, at a metaphysical level for us, at a very deep level, is this swaying back and forth between I can move forward and express and heal and bring more truth to myself, okay? As in to align with my real, authentic self, not the one that I've needed to form my sense of identity, that I needed to apply conditioning on, that I needed to conform to, that I needed to exist in a box. These parts of myself I no longer need to hide. I can allow myself to be true to who I am. And this is the potential that is here right now. And the way that you get to that place, the road that you walk to get to that place, is a deep acknowledgement of where you have been impacted by experiences that have stopped you from allowing that authenticity to be present. And part of this process is grieving where those experiences have happened, allowing them to be where they are, trying to make peace with them, and then stepping into an empowered version of yourself that is more in alignment with your natural truth and natural sense of direction. Okay? So I hope that that clears it up for you. I hope that it gives you something to think about and to work with in this video. I think that's where I'm going to end today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Have an amazing new moon, and I'll see you in another video. Bye, guys.